Captain Maya Rodriguez, callsign Blitz, leaned back in her chair aboard the interstellar research vessel Cosmic Wanderer and watched her alien crewmates debate the finer points of reaction time with all the enthusiasm of academics discussing paint drying techniques, which, considering one of them was literally made of crystalline formations, might have been more accurate than she cared to admit. The human nervous system operates at a mere 120 meters per second, Dr. Kelvin Frostbite was explaining to the others, his ice-blue crystal body refracting the bridge lights into tiny rainbows. Compare that to my Zephyrian neural network, which processes information at light speed. It's really quite remarkable that humans survived long enough to achieve spaceflight. Commander Gloop, whose gelatinous purple form was currently shaped vaguely like a professional sitting in a chair, wobbled in what Maya had learned to recognize as agreement. My species can shift our entire molecular structure in nanoseconds. Humans take whole seconds just to register danger. It's almost tragic. Engineer Sparks McGillicuddy, a hyperactive bundle of electrical energy contained in a roughly humanoid shape, crackled with enthusiasm. Don't forget their limited sensory input. They can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum, and their hearing range is pathetically narrow. How do they even function? Maya sipped her coffee and wondered, not for the first time, how she'd ended up as the token human on what was essentially a floating science fair project. The Cosmic Wanderer was technically a research vessel, but Maya suspected it was really just an excuse for various alien species to study each other's biology while pretending to explore deep space. The fact that they'd picked up a human crew member seemed to be treated as a particularly interesting lab specimen opportunity. Don't forget, she said cheerfully, we also have those pesky emotional responses that cloud our judgment. Really slows down the whole decision-making process. Frostbite's crystalline structure brightened, which Maya had learned meant he was pleased. Exactly. The human fight-or-flight response is particularly inefficient. All that adrenaline and increased heart rate actually impairs fine motor control and cognitive function. Speaking of inefficient responses, Gloop interjected, his form rippling with what passed for excitement. We're approaching the coordinates of that distress signal. A perfect opportunity to observe human limitations in a controlled environment. Maya raised an eyebrow. You know I can hear you, right? I'm sitting right here. Oh, of course, Sparks buzzed apologetically, his electrical field dimming slightly. We don't mean to be rude. It's just fascinating from a scientific perspective. Your species has overcome so many biological disadvantages through sheer determination and tool use. It's actually quite inspiring. Right, inspiring. Maya had heard variations of this conversation approximately 47 times since joining the crew 6 months ago. She'd stopped being offended around conversation 32 and had moved into a sort of anthropological fascination with how consistently condescending well-meaning aliens could be. The forward view screen flickered to life, showing their destination, a massive derelict vessel drifting against the starfield like a metal whale carcass. It was easily 3 times the size of the Cosmic Wanderer, with the sleek, predatory lines that suggested it had been built for something more aggressive than scientific research. Preliminary scans indicate the vessel has been abandoned for approximately 72 hours, Frostbite reported, his internal light pulsing as he processed data. The distress beacon is automated, but there are no life signs detected. Maya studied the ship's profile and felt that familiar itch at the back of her neck that her crewmates would probably classify as another inefficient human instinct. What's the ship's registry? Unknown, Gloop replied, his form shifting to accommodate additional sensor displays. The design matches no known civilian configurations in our database. That's because it's not civilian, Maya said quietly, already running through equipment checks. That's a Shadowclaw raider, and I'm betting it's not as abandoned as it looks. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems and Sparks's barely contained electrical crackling. Maya could practically feel her crewmates processing this information at their supposedly superior speeds. Shadowclaw pirates, Frostbite finally said, his crystalline form dimming slightly. They're known for their ruthless efficiency and tactical deception. If this is indeed one of their vessels, then this is either a genuine distress situation or a very elaborate trap, Maya finished. And given that Shadow Claw pirates consider genuine distress to be roughly equivalent to not currently pillaging something, I'm leaning toward trap. Gloop's gelatinous mass shifted nervously. Perhaps we should maintain our distance and contact Galactic Defense Force? The nearest GDF patrol is 16 hours away, Sparks reported, his electrical field pulsing with anxiety. If there are actual survivors aboard that vessel, they won't last that long. Maya was already suiting up, her movements economical and practiced. So we go in, carefully, and we assume everything is trying to kill us until proven otherwise. But Maya, Frostbite protested, your human reaction times. We'll be just fine, thanks. Maya sealed her helmet and ran through her equipment checklist. Standard issue plasma sidearm, emergency medical kit, multi-tool, and a few items that weren't exactly standard issue but which she'd found useful over the years. You guys forget that humans didn't get to the top of our food chain by being slow. We got there by being too stubborn to stay dead and too creative to fight fair. That's exactly what concerns us, Gloop muttered, but he was already shifting into his combat configuration a more streamlined form that could absorb and deflect energy weapons. Your species has an alarming tendency toward violence. Only when necessary, Maya said cheerfully, checking her weapon's charge. The rest of the time we're perfectly peaceful. We just happen to have a very flexible definition of necessary. Sparks's form brightened with what Maya had learned to recognize as his version of nervous laughter. I can interface directly with the ship's systems once we're aboard. My electrical manipulation will allow me to override any security measures in microseconds. And my crystalline structure can analyze atmospheric composition, structural integrity, and potential hazards faster than any scanner, Frostbite added, clearly trying to convince himself as much as the others. We'll know immediately if the environment is safe. Plus I can reshape myself to fit through any opening or deflect most energy weapons, Gloop contributed. Theoretically, we should be able to handle any situation more efficiently than a mixed crew with human limitations. Maya finished her equipment check and turned to face her crewmates. Right, so let me get this straight. You can process information at light speed, manipulate matter at the molecular level, and interface directly with technology. And I'm the liability because I have to think things through for a whole fraction of a second before acting. Well, Frostbite said diplomatically, when you put it that way. I'm not criticizing, Maya said, heading toward the airlock. I'm just making sure we're all clear on our respective capabilities. Because in about 10 minutes we're going to find out exactly how useful those capabilities are in the real world. The docking procedure was routine. Despite the ominous circumstances, the Shadow Claw vessel's airlock systems were still functional, which Maya found simultaneously convenient and suspicious. Pirates didn't usually maintain their ships in good enough condition for automated docking unless they had a specific reason. Atmospheric composition is within acceptable parameters for all species present, Frostbite reported as they prepared to board. Gravity is set to galactic standard. No immediate environmental hazards detected. Life support is running on backup power, Sparks added, his form flickering slightly as he interfaced with the ship's systems. Main power grid appears to be offline, but emergency systems are fully functional. Almost like someone wanted to make sure visitors could survive long enough to walk into whatever trap they've set up, Maya finished. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Gloop's form rippled uneasily. Perhaps this isn't the best idea. If we know it's a trap, then we spring it on our terms instead of theirs, Maya said, cycling the airlock. Besides, you guys have all those superior reflexes and processing speeds. What could possibly go wrong? The inner airlock door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the heart of the ship. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, and the air carried that distinctive metallic smell of a ship that had been sealed up for too long. Motion sensors detect no movement in the immediate area, Frostbite whispered, his voice carrying clearly through their comm system. Heat signatures are minimal, Sparks added. If anyone's aboard, they're either very good at hiding or they're not generating heat signatures, Maya interrupted, her hand resting casually on her weapon. Some species don't, you know? And some very unfriendly technology doesn't either. They moved into the corridor in formation, with Gloop taking point due to his natural armor, Frostbite and Sparks in the middle for sensor support, and Maya bringing up the rear. It was a sensible arrangement that played to everyone's strengths, and Maya was perfectly content to let her crewmates feel like they were in control of the situation. Right up until the moment when everything went sideways. The first sign of trouble was the soft click of magnetic clamps engaging along the corridor walls. Maya's brain registered the sound and its implications in the time it took her heart to complete one beat. Her crewmates, with all their superior processing speeds, were still analyzing the acoustic signature when Maya was already moving. Trap. She barked into the comm, but the word was barely out of her mouth before sections of the corridor walls slid away to reveal hidden alcoves packed with Shadowclaw pirates. The pirates were a nasty piece of work even by Galactic standards, reptilian humanoids with natural armor plating, and a cultural philosophy that roughly translated to if it's not nailed down, steal it, and if it is nailed down, steal the nails too. They were also, Maya noted with professional interest, significantly faster than most species when it came to physical movement. Unfortunately for them, they'd made the classic mistake of assuming that fast was the same thing as effective. Frostbite's crystalline form had barely begun to shift into analysis mode when the first wave of pirates emerged from their hiding spots. His light-speed processing was certainly impressive, but it turns out that thinking really fast about being endangered doesn't actually help much when you're already in danger. Multiple hostiles. He managed to report, his structure flashing with alarm signals. Estimated 17 individuals armed with plasma weapons and a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, cutting off his tactical assessment. Frostbite did what any sensible scientist would do when faced with imminent violence. He froze up completely while his mind raced through approximately 15,000 possible courses of action in the span of a second. Sparks fared slightly better, his electrical nature making him naturally agile, but his hyperactive energy worked against him in a combat situation. He began to crackle and spark in every direction at once, which was certainly impressive to watch but not particularly useful for neutralizing specific threats. I can overload their weapons. He buzzed frantically, electricity arcing between his limbs. I just need to interface with their power systems and another plasma bolt, this one close enough to make his electrical field flicker dangerously. Sparks yelped and began a tactical retreat that looked more like a high-voltage panic attack. Commander Gloop had the best initial response, immediately shifting his gelatinous form into a defensive configuration that could absorb energy weapons. His molecular control was genuinely impressive, and for a moment it looked like his superior capabilities might actually be useful. Then he made the mistake of trying to think his way through the situation instead of just reacting to it. Analyzing optimal defensive formation, he announced, his form rippling as he calculated angles and force distribution, factoring in energy dispersion rates and structural integrity parameters. While Gloop was busy being analytical, 3 pirates had flanked him and were preparing to hit him with some kind of molecular disruptor that would turn his greatest strength into his greatest weakness. Maya could see it happening, could see exactly how the next 5 seconds were going to play out if someone didn't do something right now. So she did something. The first pirate went down when Maya's plasma bolt took out his weapon hand. The second one had just enough time to register that the slow human had somehow drawn and fired while he was still bringing his own weapon to bear. The third pirate managed to get his molecular disruptor lined up on Gloop's position, right up until Maya's second shot punched through his chest armor. Contact left. Maya called out, already moving to new cover. Gloop, stop thinking and start moving. Sparks, less light show, more target acquisition. Frostbite, I need tactical data, not a dissertation. The corridor erupted into chaos as more pirates emerged from concealment. Maya counted muzzle flashes, tracked movement patterns, and calculated firing angles while her supposedly superior crewmates were still processing the fact that their carefully planned approach had gone completely to hell. A plasma bolt seared past Maya's shoulder as she rolled behind a structural support beam. She popped up, acquired her target, and put 2 rounds center mass into a pirate who had been lining up a shot on sparks. The pirate dropped, his weapon clattering across the deck plating. "How is she moving so fast?" one of the pirates hissed in their clicking reptilian language. Maya had picked up enough Shadowclaw to understand the basics, which was more than her crewmates could say. "It's just one human." Another pirate snarled. "They're supposed to be slow." Maya grinned as she shifted position, keeping the pirates off balance. "Sorry to disappoint," she muttered, putting another round into a pirate who had made the mistake of exposing himself while trying to flank Gloop. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her alien crewmates, with their superior reflexes and processing speeds, were huddled behind cover trying to analyze their way out of a firefight. Meanwhile, the slow human was systematically dismantling a pirate ambush through the simple expedient of shooting first and asking questions later. "Maya?" Frostbite called out, his voice tight with panic. "There are more of them coming from the aft section. My sensors indicate at least 12 additional hostiles approaching our position." Maya glanced down the corridor and saw movement in the shadows. More pirates, moving with the confidence of predators who thought they had their prey cornered. They were spreading out, using proper tactical formation, clearly intending to overwhelm the small boarding party through superior numbers. It was a solid plan. It might even have worked against a normal crew. Unfortunately for the Shadowclaw pirates, Maya wasn't feeling particularly normal today. "Stay here and keep them busy," Maya told her crewmates, ejecting her weapon-spent power cell and slapping in a fresh one. "I'm going to go have a conversation with our new friends." "Maya, wait," Gloop called out, but she was already moving. What happened next would later be described by Frostbite as a fascinating example of human combat adaptability, and by Sparks as absolutely terrifying, and by Gloop as reasons why humans should never be allowed to have weapons. Maya preferred to think of it as Tuesday. She moved down the corridor like a force of nature, but not the kind that makes pretty rainbows or inspiring sunsets. More like the kind that leaves property damage and insurance claims in its wake. The first group of pirates had positioned themselves behind a bulkhead door, confident that they could control access to the main corridor. Maya solved their tactical advantage by putting 3 plasma bolts through the door's locking mechanism, then kicking the whole thing off its hinges. The improvised battering ram took out 2 pirates and gave the rest something to think about besides their firing solutions. Humans aren't supposed to be that strong. One of the surviving pirates yelped in Shadowclaw. "Tell it to the door," Maya replied cheerfully, putting a bolt through his center mass. She kept moving, using the ship's own architecture against its occupants. A maintenance panel became an improvised explosive when she overloaded its power coupling. A gravity generator turned into a very effective area denial weapon when she reversed its polarity, sending 3 pirates floating helplessly into the overhead, where they made excellent stationary targets. The ship's internal sensors tried to track her movement, but Maya was moving too fast and too unpredictably for the automated systems to keep up. She'd learned a long time ago that the best way to deal with superior technology was to do things that the technology wasn't designed to handle. Like using a fire suppression system as an improvised weapon. The pressurized foam wasn't lethal, but it was dense enough to knock a Shadowclaw pirate off his feet, and slippery enough to make sure he stayed there long enough for Maya to put a plasma bolt through his weapon. "She's cleared the first junction," Frostbite reported to the others, his voice crackling with amazement over the comm. "How is she moving that fast?" "Fast?" Maya panted slightly as she pressed herself against a bulkhead, listening for movement ahead. "This is just warm-up speed. You should see me when I'm actually trying." The next section of the ship was a cargo bay that the pirates had converted into a kill zone. Multiple levels, lots of cover, overlapping fields of fire. It was a textbook ambush setup, and Maya walked right into it. Then she proceeded to turn their textbook into confetti. The pirates had positioned themselves to catch targets in a crossfire from 3 different elevations. What they hadn't counted on was Maya's willingness to ignore conventional tactics and improvise solutions on the fly. She used a cargo crane as a zipline, swinging across the bay while laying down suppressing fire. Before the pirates could adjust their positions, she dropped down behind their cover and was suddenly shooting at them from their own defensive positions. Contact rear. One of the pirates shouted, but Maya was already moving again. She bounced between cargo containers like a deadly pinball, using momentum and geometry to stay one step ahead of their targeting solutions. A grenade here, a plasma bolt there, and suddenly the cargo bay was a lot quieter than it had been 30 seconds earlier. Cargo bay secured, Maya announced over the comm, moving to Section C. Maya, Gloop's voice was tight with concern, your heart rate is elevated, and your bio readings indicate significant stress. Perhaps you should fall back and let the professionals handle it? Maya suggested, checking her remaining ammunition. Thanks, but I'm just getting started. Section C turned out to be crew quarters that had been converted into a maze of improvised barricades. The pirates had clearly spent some time preparing this area, with intersecting fields of fire and multiple escape routes. It was the kind of setup that should have taken a coordinated team effort to clear safely. Maya cleared it in 47 seconds. She did it by ignoring the maze entirely and going through the walls instead. Plasma bolts could cut through bulkhead plating if you knew where to aim, and Maya had spent enough time on ships to know exactly where the structural weak points were. Why navigate a maze when you could just make your own doors? The pirates found themselves under attack from directions they hadn't planned for, by an enemy who apparently didn't understand that you were supposed to use the corridors like a civilized person. By the time they'd adjusted their defensive positions, Maya had already moved on to Section D. She's not following any recognizable tactical doctrine, one of the pirates reported over their comm system, which Maya was monitoring with the translation app. She's just making it up as she goes. That's the problem with you guys, Maya muttered, pausing to catch her breath. You think tactics are something you read about in a manual instead of something you figure out on the spot. Section D was the ship's main engineering deck, and the pirates had turned it into their final stronghold. Heavy weapons, hardened positions, and enough firepower to turn the entire deck into a shooting gallery. They were confident that no single opponent could possibly breach their defenses. Maya looked at their setup, counted the weapons emplacements, calculated the angles of fire, and came to a professional conclusion. Well, she said to herself, this is going to be loud. It was loud. Very loud. The kind of loud that made the ship's hull ring like a bell and triggered every damage control alert from bow to stern. When the smoke cleared and the emergency klaxons finally stopped wailing, Maya was standing in the middle of what had once been the engineering deck, surrounded by the scattered remains of what had once been the pirates' final stronghold. All clear, she announced over the comm, holstering her weapon. You guys can come out now. The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that usually indicated either deep contemplation or severe psychological trauma. Maya suspected it was a little of both. Maya, Frostbite's voice finally crackled through the comm. What exactly did you do to the engineering section? Maya looked around at the creative rearrangement of bulkheads, conduits, and former pirates that decorated the deck. I improvised. You know, that thing humans do when they don't have time to analyze 17,000 possible solutions. Her crewmates found her 15 minutes later, picking through the wreckage and securing any potentially useful intelligence. They stood in the doorway of what had once been a heavily fortified position and stared at the aftermath with the kind of stunned expressions usually reserved for natural disasters. 17 pirates, Gloop said numbly, his gelatinous form rippling with disbelief. You neutralized 17 armed pirates in less than 6 minutes. 8 minutes, Maya corrected, checking her chronometer. But who's counting? Myar. Sparks's electrical field was flickering erratically, which Maya had learned meant he was processing information faster than usual. The ship's internal sensors recorded the entire engagement. The data is unprecedented. Let me guess, Maya said, shouldering her equipment pack. You want to analyze my performance for scientific purposes. Maya, Frostbite said carefully, his crystalline structure pulsing with what she'd learned to recognize as barely controlled excitement. You moved through 12 separate ship sections, neutralized 29 hostile combatants, and cleared every room before our sensors could even register the engagement was over. 29? I thought you said 17. 17 in the engineering section alone, Gloop clarified. The total count includes the corridor ambush, the cargo bay, crew quarters, and 3 other sections where you encountered resistance. Maya paused in her equipment check. Busy day. Busy day? Sparks's voice cracked with electrical discharge. Maya, you cleared an entire pirate vessel single-handedly in less time than it takes most species to complete a threat assessment. And you did it, Frostbite added, his analytical nature overriding his shock, with what we classified as inferior human reflexes and processing speed. Maya slung her rifle and headed toward the exit. Maybe it's time to reconsider your classifications. The trip back to the Cosmic Wanderer was conducted in the kind of thoughtful silence that indicated serious philosophical adjustments were taking place. Maya busied herself with post-mission equipment maintenance while her crewmates grappled with some rather significant updates to their understanding of human capabilities. I've been reviewing the sensor data, Frostbite announced as they reached their ship's airlock. Maya, your reaction time during the initial ambush was measured at 0.03 seconds from first contact to effective response. That's faster than my electrical discharge rate, Sparks added quietly. And your tactical adaptability, Gloop continued, showed no decrease in effectiveness despite encountering completely unexpected scenarios in each section of the ship. Maya sealed the airlock behind them and began her post-mission decontamination routine. It's called experience, guys, plus a little something we humans like to call winging it. But the speed, Frostbite insisted. Our initial assessment of human neural processing was, based on laboratory conditions, Maya interrupted, hanging up her gear. You tested human reaction time for simple stimulus response, not combat effectiveness. There's a difference between how fast someone can push a button when they see a light and how fast they can kill something that's trying to kill them. You're saying that human performance increases under life-threatening conditions? Gloop asked. But I'm saying that human performance is optimized for life-threatening conditions, Maya corrected. We didn't evolve in a laboratory. We evolved being chased by things with big teeth and bad attitudes. Everything else is just a pleasant break from the routine. Sparks's electrical field had stabilized, but Maya could tell he was still processing. So when we calculated that humans were slow, you were measuring us at idle speed, Maya confirmed. It's like judging a starship's performance based on how it handles while docked. The implications of this settled over her crewmates like a particularly heavy blanket. Maya could practically see the mental recalculations happening behind their various optical sensors. Maya, Frostbite said slowly, if human combat performance is that much higher than your baseline capabilities, and your baseline capabilities include things like interstellar travel and advanced technology, then maybe, Maya suggested helpfully, you should stop thinking of humans as the slow kids in galactic civilization. But you're always so calm, Gloop protested. So reasonable. So peaceful. Maya smiled as she headed toward the bridge. That's because we don't have to prove anything. We already know what we're capable of when it matters. The rest of the time, we can afford to be nice. 3 days later, Maya was back in her usual chair on the bridge, sipping her coffee and listening to her crewmates discuss their latest research project. The conversation had a noticeably different tone than before. Perhaps we should approach the asteroid field from a different vector, Spark suggested, his electrical field crackling nervously. You know, just to be safe. Agreed, Frostbite said, his crystalline structure dim with what Maya had learned to recognize as carefully controlled anxiety. We wouldn't want to encounter any unexpected hostiles. The probability of pirate activity in this sector is relatively low, Gloop added, his gelatinous form maintaining a more compact, defensive configuration than usual. "But Maya, what do you think? You have more experience with these situations." Maya looked up from her coffee to find 3 pairs of alien optical sensors focused on her with the kind of respectful attention usually reserved for unstable explosives or religious artifacts. "I think you're overthinking it. It's just an asteroid field. What's the worst that could happen?" The collective flinch from her crewmates was subtle but unmistakable. "Right," Frostbite said quickly. "Just an asteroid field. Nothing to worry about." "Absolutely nothing," Sparks agreed, his electrical discharge rate increasing slightly. "Completely routine," Gloop added, though his form rippled with what Maya suspected was barely suppressed panic. Maya leaned back in her chair and studied her crewmates with amusement. "You know, guys, I'm still the same person I was a week ago. I haven't suddenly developed a taste for violence or anything." "Of course not," Frostbite said diplomatically. "It's just that we've gained a new appreciation for human capabilities under stress. And we want to make sure you don't feel stressed," Sparks added quickly. "Because when humans feel stressed, they do things," Gloop concluded. "Effective things. Rapidly." Maya couldn't help but laugh. "So let me get this straight. You've gone from thinking humans are too slow to be useful to thinking we're too dangerous to be comfortable around." "Not dangerous," Frostbite protested, "but just remarkably capable. In ways that our previous analysis failed to account for." "We've updated all of our threat assessment protocols," Sparks added proudly. "Humans are now classified as deceptively benign until activated." "Activated?" "Mated. It's a technical term," Gloop explained. "It refers to the transition from baseline human performance to combat-optimized human performance. The statistical variance is quite significant." Maya set down her coffee and looked at her crewmates with the kind of patient expression she usually reserved for explaining basic concepts to particularly slow students. "You want to know the real secret about humans?" 3 alien heads nodded with synchronized eagerness. "We're not peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because we're strong enough that we don't have to prove it every 5 minutes. Most of the time, we'd rather just get along with everyone and go about our business. It's easier, it's more pleasant, and frankly, it's a lot less paperwork." "Paperwork?" Sparks asked. "Incident reports. Casualty assessments. Damage estimates. Explaining to your insurance company why your starship has plasma burns on the hull. That kind of thing." "But when peace isn't an option?" Frostbite pressed. Maya shrugged. "Then we handle the problem and get back to being peaceful as quickly as possible. It's not complicated." "It is from our perspective," Gloop said quietly. "Most species in galactic civilization have to choose between being capable fighters or being successful at other pursuits. Humans seem to be good at everything simultaneously." "We're adaptable," Maya agreed. "It's kind of our thing. We can be scientists, artists, explorers, diplomats, whatever the situation requires. And yeah, sometimes the situation requires us to be really, really good at making problems go away permanently. The galaxy is going to be very surprised when it figures this out," Frostbite observed. Maya grinned and picked up her coffee again. "Oh, I don't think it'll take that long. Word gets around. Give it a few more months, and I bet you'll start seeing some interesting changes in how humans are treated in interstellar politics." "Changes like what?" Sparks asked. "Like maybe fewer people will assume we're too primitive to matter. Like maybe more people will decide that keeping humans happy is a better long-term strategy than dismissing us as irrelevant." "And if they don't?" Gloop asked. Maya's smile didn't change, but somehow it became significantly less reassuring. "Then they'll learn. Humans are very good teachers when we put our minds to it." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems and the faint crackling of Sparks's nervous electrical discharge. Finally, Frostbite cleared his crystalline throat with a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Maya," he said carefully, "would you mind if we updated our species database entry for humans?" "What did it say before?" Bipedal mammals notable for their persistence and tool use. Generally harmless. Reaction time slow. Combat effectiveness minimal. Threat level negligible. Maya raised an eyebrow. And what are you thinking of changing it to? Frostbite's crystalline structure flickered as he processed the question. How about bipedal mammals notable for their adaptability and tactical innovation? Extremely dangerous when provoked. Reaction time, variable, optimized for survival scenarios. Combat effectiveness, devastating. Threat level, do not engage unless absolutely necessary, and even then, consider surrender as a viable option. That seems a bit dramatic, Maya said, though she was grinning. Maya, Gloop said solemnly, you cleared an entire pirate vessel in 8 minutes. If that's not dramatic, I don't know what is. Fair point. Maya stood up and stretched, her movements casual and relaxed. Her crewmates tracked every motion with the kind of attention usually reserved for potentially explosive materials. Well, if we're updating databases, you might want to add a note about humans and coffee consumption. We get cranky when we don't have our caffeine, and trust me, you don't want to see a cranky human in action.
Noted, Sparks said quickly, his electrical field brightening with what Maya suspected was relief at having actionable intelligence. Also, Maya added as she headed toward the galley, you might want to mention that we're generally pretty reasonable if you just ask us nicely instead of trying to kill us first. It's amazing how much more cooperative we are when people start with please instead of surrender or die. We'll be sure to include that in our diplomatic protocols, Frostbite assured her. Maya paused in the doorway and looked back at her crewmates. You know what the really funny part is? A week ago, you were all convinced that humans were too slow and primitive to be useful crew members. Now you're treating me like I'm some kind of walking weapon system. Well, Gloop said diplomatically, you did single-handedly neutralize an entire pirate crew. Sure, but that was just Tuesday. You should see what I can do on a Friday when I'm really motivated. The collective shudder from her alien crewmates was barely perceptible, but Maya caught it anyway. She decided to take pity on them. Relax, guys, I'm not going to hurt you. You're my friends. Besides, who would I complain to about the coffee if something happened to you? As she disappeared into the galley, Maya could hear her crewmates beginning what sounded like a very serious discussion about human psychology, threat assessment, and the diplomatic implications of having accidentally recruited what they now realized was essentially a one-person military unit. Maya smiled to herself as she started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. It was going to be interesting to see how long it took the rest of galactic civilization to figure out what her crewmates had just learned. Humans had been playing the role of harmless primitives for so long that most species had forgotten to ask the obvious question. If humans were really as slow and weak as everyone assumed, how exactly had they managed to survive long enough to develop interstellar travel? The answer, of course, was that they weren't slow at all. They were just patient. And patience, as any good predator knew, was just another word for waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Maya poured herself a cup of coffee and settled back into her chair, perfectly content to let the galaxy continue underestimating humanity for a little while longer. After all, there was something to be said for the element of surprise. Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled slowly past, and somewhere in the distance, another species was probably making the same mistake the Shadowclaw pirates had made, assuming that slow meant harmless, and that harmless meant safe. Maya sipped her coffee and smiled. It was going to be a very educational galaxy. They said humans were slow killers. She cleared the room before the alarm even triggered.